Continuing on our grief journey. I went through 45 days of grief and I shared along the way, and now I am sharing what I've learned into how do we actually grieve. Today I'm going to be talking about your spiritual self, and please, if you do not believe in God, don't stop watching. Watch until the end, and I'll kind of explain why this is so important. I have identified 5 selves that we need to focus on as we are healing from grief. That is self-care, self-regulation. Today I'm talking about our spiritual self, self-improvement, and self-movement. So continue watching, subscribe. I'm Cristi Bundukamara. I am a mental health professional. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner with over 20 years of clinical experience. But my real experience comes from my hardship and my loss. Losing children undoubtedly is the worst thing or worst grief that anyone could experience. There's other intense griefs that are difficult to move on from. But I have lost children, and it sometimes feels unbearable. And when you have lost a child, when you have lost a loved one, it is important to take the time to evaluate your eternal belief system. And the reason I said in the very beginning, if you don't believe in God, please keep watching. I'm a part of a Facebook group that is just for grieving mothers. And so you can imagine there's a lot of pain in that group. And at least once a week, somebody posts on there in a very defensive way, like, can somebody respond to me that doesn't believe in God? Because oftentimes, when people are finding their truth after tragic loss, they turn to God. And that's their truth. But what about your spiritual health if you don't believe in God? You are still a spiritual being. We are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. And what that means for you, you have to find that truth. And you have to find it. Oftentimes, you're looking outside of yourself for someone to tell you what the truth is. And that is really why in the Mentally Strong Method, which I talk about in other videos, I have a category for spiritual conflict. Because I was looking at the church, the pastors, the people who had an authority in God to tell me what my truth was. And I still struggle with that. And I'm still working through my truth. But even like in the same Facebook group I was talking about, one of these ladies who have lost a child, she went to a medium, and really after going to that medium, really felt good and connected to her child who had passed. But a year later, she felt disconnected because that connection was between the medium and her loved one. And I challenge you in this process of finding your truth is finding that truth for you spiritually, and you have to start somewhere. And if you don't believe in a one God, that's fine. I heard somebody say one time, and we have a paper here, no laughing at my drawing, but there's 2 types of religions or spiritual belief systems. And one is God down, right? God is pouring out his love, or, you have a belief system in a significant higher power that is giving downward, right? But many, and especially like Eastern religions, it's not, this is my person meditating, don't you laugh. Okay? It starts with self. And this is why I'm talking about the 5 selves. And your spiritual self, you have a spiritual self. You have one. Many people who do not believe in God, have had kind of what we call church trauma or moral injury from people who were claiming to be a representation of God. But many religions, it starts with self, right? Self-love, meditation, receiving. But it then goes up to, something like a universal energy. Okay? It doesn't stay with self. So, as you are starting this spiritual self journey, and this is what I'm challenging you, and even if you believe in an almighty God that's going to take care of everything, you have to acknowledge that you have some spiritual conflict around that they took your loved one. Wherever you are here, start. So if you are adamant that there is no God, that's fine. Look into, religions that are about self-love and self-regulation. And then as we love ourselves, we'll be able to grow into loving others and putting that positive energy out into the universe. We are all somewhere here. And, when we say finding your truth, I was saved in a pretty conservative Christian church, and there's many things that I do believe about those things. I do personally believe that there is a God, and that is my truth. But I also meditate. I also know that there is truth to collective consciousness, to universal energy. And that is what my journey has allowed me to experience. And I was talking to my sister about it as we were going through this and creating the grief documentary. I was actually scared to share some of the meditation practices because I was taught that they were evil, that they were not of God. And I know that that's not true. All good things are from God. And I also know that many times, as someone who does believe in God, I feel this pressure, in the church they call it evangelism. I feel this pressure to tell you that this is a truth. But I can tell you, after intense loss, like losing a child, you question everything, and you rightfully should. And so my truth might not be your truth. And to all of my Christian friends who are watching and they're a little concerned that I'm not, leading people to God, my challenge to you is that if you really believe that He's all-powerful and all-knowing and He is loving, then you need to allow people to find their truth, because if that is true, they will find that. But I can tell you, the spiritual conflict that occurs when you have only this belief system and your child is taken again and again, I need to feel other things. I need to have that connection with my children. And I also did go to a medium. For me, it was kind of a confirmation that I do have a connection with my children and that they are able to communicate with me. If you've been following me for a long time, my first version of my book, you know, I had an experience with Reggie after his death and I downplayed it. But after losing Maya, I'm not going to be quiet. So my journey was finding my truth. And I challenge you to find your truth, to find a spiritual relationship. We talk about this in the Mentally Strong Method. How is this impacting your spiritual relationship? A spiritual relationship is anything in here. It's not just a relationship with a one-person God or a three-person God. It is all of these things. It is a relationship with yourself, your spiritual self. So that's what I have learned in pushing myself through this grief process, is these 5 selves. The self-care, self-regulation, that's regulating our mental and emotional states. Spiritual self, finding your truth. Self-improvement, always on that journey. And self-movement. Get those things out of the body. As we're going through this, in mental health, we often talk about having a spiritual relationship is a protective factor for suicide. But I can tell you, most grieving parents that I have spoken to have at least momentarily thought about suicide, right? And especially, like, it's, you know, it's supposed to be this beautiful place that we're going, you know, why not just go? Why not just get there if all of this magic and beauty is true? Because it's way more complicated than that. It's way more complicated, and I don't know what the absolute truth is. I don't think any of us know what the absolute truth is. But what can you do, right? I talk about this in another video. You have a choice. You can manage where you put your energy, and you can manage how you react. And so making your spiritual self a priority. Where are you here? I personally, probably 10 years ago, started up here. Like, I felt like I had a great relationship with God. I prayed, and then Reggie died. And I was still here. Like, I still believed in God. But boy, I was not okay spiritually. I wanted to say, is this even real? This is the atheist, the agnostic. And that's okay. If that's where you are, that's okay. Start down here. You got to believe in yourself. You wake up every day and feel your body. You're physically there. You know you have mental and emotional things going on. I believe there's a seed planted in everyone that knows that you have a spiritual self. Start here. During my 45 days of grief, I did some meditation. And this word is overused and completely misunderstood. You could actually get college degrees in meditation, right? It's not just this clear your mind. There's tons of different types of meditation. And meditation is about resting the brain. Some are about receiving. And I was actually talking to a Christian friend of mine, and I was telling her about my meditation practices. And they were in this realm of self and universe. But She's like, well, why can't you just use the word prayer? That's great. Prayer is us going up. So you could be all the way down here in your meditation and be praying, right? Prayer is up. Meditation is down, inward, right? So if your bubble is only right here and you only have, this space, you're just coming inward from that space. But meditation can come all the way from there as well. So these are not opposites. This is all the divine. This is all that spiritual relationship, that what is outside of ourselves. Even science is talking about, quantum physics and this almost hologram of different dimensions. This is science that is proving these things. String theory, this is not just, and so when, it's so complicated when somebody on Facebook says, I don't believe in God, give me another answer. You've got to do the self-improvement. You've got to do the research to find your truth. And so our next video is going to be about that. Self-improvement so that you can find your truth. We are all somewhere in here, and we should hopefully respect wherever you are, wherever someone you love is, and really working through that on a personal level. It's okay to reach out to people and get their opinion, which that's what education is. But finding your truth and your spiritual self. So I hope that is helpful. I hope that those that are really struggling in this area watched the whole process that I'm talking about. I'm challenging you that in intense grief, we need to find our spiritual self. And that does not mean what someone else is telling you happened to your child or happened to your husband, or really, what do you believe? And I talk about this in another video, but what do you know is true? What do you think maybe is true? And what do you think is not true that maybe you were taught spiritually? And start from there. Kind of decide, where am I on this? And how can I feed that? And acknowledge that spiritual self. I believe that we are all mentally strong, and we are, kind of growing up or going through this in a culture of conflict around spirituality. But you only need yourself and finding those practices that are going to work for you. So I believe that you are mentally strong.